Now we want to pivot to the topic of cryptozoology. Question, does Bigfoot, Yeti, Sasquatch, can they even exist? Well, let's take a look at life on Earth. This is a beautiful American crocodile. It's a beautiful creature that we saw. It's a majestic creature. But first we want to do a recap of evolution. What it is, what it's not. And to understand something, we want to break it down to a simple to understand the concept. The process of life emergence. Think about it as a gigantic tree of life. All life sharing a common ancestor. So you start with imagine a massive tree with millions of different permutations of branches, ending in individual leaves. Okay, individual clusters. Think about the leaves as the species. Okay, that's currently in existence. That's the downstream. The ultimate downstream, what exists now. The beginning of life from abiogenesis, from the geochemical cycles, where biology emerged from basically organic chemistry, stellar evolution, so basically where life emerged from non-living energy, where energy transforms itself from this non-living matter to living matter. You get to a point where the first biological organism develops. That's a seed, and from that seed, from that single common ancestor, you have a sprout, eventually grows into a gigantic tree with billions and billions of branches and ultimately different species. And first of all, evolution doesn't say human beings did not evolve from lemurs, monkeys, the great apes, and the monkeys, everything you see today. So you look at the primates. Other primates are cousins to modern day humans, many times removed. They're not siblings sharing a common parent. Ultimately, there's a common ancestor, as do all life forms have a common ancestor. But the human being didn't evolve from the chimpanzee or the bonobo. The bonobo and the chimpanzee cannot eventually evolve into a human being. They're separate branches, separate forks. So if you take the separate forks, if you go back one level, back one level, how many different steps removed, genetically removed, different. There's the ancestors of the chimpanzee, bonobo, but eventually you get to a common ancestor where it forks into the different hominids, where one branch becomes the great apes, another branch becomes the monkeys, the lemurs, and different hominids, and which basically one branch subdivides. So human beings are on a totally different branch from all the other primates that we see today. So there's a huge misconception that humans emerge from chimpanzees, where chimpanzees can evolve into human. They're completely separate branches. Evolution does not teach that humans evolve from the great apes, and evolution does not teach that the great apes can become human, or human can become the great apes. They're totally separate branches. That's not how evolution works. But now we're going to talk about something else. Why we don't think Bigfoot and Sasquatch can exist today, because any type of population where you see one specimen of a living specimen of Bigfoot, you're gonna have, where there's one, you're gonna have at least 1,000. So if at any one point you have a genetic bottleneck where you're down to 50 living organisms, we have a genetic bottleneck. Now basically they're at risk of going extinct. If you have a population, they're going to be like the Great Panda. Okay, so you get a small genetic bottleneck. Now what happens? Researchers try to repopulate the panda, but they don't seem to want to breed, and we kind of think that the panda is just sort of going to the wayside of evolution. They do the exact opposite of what the horseshoe crab does. In every season, these horseshoe crabs, they gather upon a beach, and they're doing what evolution does: reproduction, replication. And they haven't changed for practically 445 million years, unchanged, because they're perfectly adapted. They don't need to evolve a bigger brain unless the climate radically changes. If the climate radically changes, either the species goes extinct, or there's a mutation, and that mutation is going to be replicated because it confers some type of advantage. If the environment changes too suddenly, species just die. Okay, there's not enough time for some mutation to develop where it's advantageous. If the Earth becomes a steaming hot pot, human beings would just go extinct. There's no time for, it's impossible to emerge some type of mutation that's going to adapt to the environment of Venus for the human being level. But essentially, this is logical. Now, human beings have encroached upon the whole planet. Okay, so if we go back 200, 500 years ago, let's just say the 11th century, maybe that's possible, but now, basically, people claim to see Bigfoot all the time. All the time on social media. They saw a Bigfoot down in Florida or something, but our conception is, if you have these urban areas, where you have one Bigfoot, there's going to be a whole, you have to have a whole tribe of Bigfoots. There's no way for a creature in the wild, what lifespan? Probably at most 30 years. Okay? Now imagine, just a thought experiment. Imagine 1950, there's 5 surviving Bigfoots. Okay, maybe you got male and female, a bottleneck. Eventually even down to 5 individuals. If theoretically, if they breed, they reproduce, or theoretically crossbreed, from that genetic bottleneck, if they're successful, maybe they can repopulate a local area, basically some type of national park, more desolate national park land or something like that. But if you assume there were a population of 5 Bigfoots, 10, 30, that's a huge bottleneck. Most likely from that would basically mean the species goes extinct in a decade. But if you're looking at an urban area, for example, Florida or something like that, where, look at the map. The Everglades, that's, human encroachment is everywhere. So if you've seen one Bigfoot, there would absolutely have to be a sustainable breeding population. Without a sustainable breeding population, it's impossible to have any surviving members of whatever species. Okay, so to us it's impossible that one Bigfoot is seen out of the blue, but there's no sign of the troop, no sign of the tribe, no sign of large numbers. It's impossible for one specimen to survive in the wild without a tribe. So the 5 Bigfoot, they die, they don't reproduce, that's the end of the Bigfoot. So there has to be, for Bigfoot to exist, there has to be a huge number, not necessarily a huge number, but basically a minimum sustainable breeding population. Okay, think about the pandas. The horseshoe crab has no problem in the reproduction, replication, the breeding department. But the giant panda is at risk of going extinct because essentially they seem to have an issue there. So again, endangered panda, the horseshoe crab, that's one of the evolution's most successful creatures. Same concept would apply to the Bigfoot. You gotta have a sustainable breeding population where they go extinct, which could be the case of the giant panda. They seem to have a lot of problems in that department, and their numbers are just very low. Again, same concept. This is why we don't think Bigfoot exists. Now, we would love to encounter one. Now, science, you change your mind. If we encounter Bigfoot, we're going to change our mind about that. But based on this deductive reasoning, based on biology, we don't think it exists. That's our 2 piece on that.